I stood at the altar in a dress that cost more than most people's cars, watching my sister's face twist with that familiar combination of spite and triumph. She was walking toward me through the crowd of wedding guests, her hand pressed dramatically against her still flat stomach, right on schedule. "Vivian, I'm so sorry," Miranda called out, her voice pitched perfectly to carry across the garden venue. "I can't keep this secret anymore. I'm pregnant." The collective gasp from 300 guests was almost musical. I felt Adrian's hand tense in mine, his jaw tightening. The officiant froze mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. My mother's face drained of color in the front row. I smiled. "Congratulations," I said clearly, squeezing Adrian's hand before he could speak. "That's wonderful news, Miranda. We're so happy for you." The confusion that flickered across her face was delicious. This wasn't how it had gone before. In my first life, I had shattered. I'd screamed, I'd cried, I'd fled the ceremony in my wedding dress, mascara streaming down my face while our guests whispered and stared. I'd let Miranda paint herself as the apologetic victim, forced to reveal an uncomfortable truth. I'd let Adrian's cold dismissal destroy me, his family's contempt bury me, my own mother's disappointment finish the job. I'd died alone 3 years later in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and regret, while Miranda posted vacation photos from the Italian villa she'd moved into as Adrian's wife. But that was before I opened my eyes on my 25th birthday, 3 years in the past, with every painful memory intact and a second chance burning in my chest like swallowed fire. "Wait," Miranda said, her rehearsed speech faltering. "Vivian, you don't understand. The baby—" "Can we discuss this at the reception?" I interrupted gently, my voice warm and understanding. "This is such important news, but we have all these guests waiting. Let's finish the ceremony first, and then we can celebrate properly. After all, family is what matters most." I watched her recalibrate, saw the gears turning behind her eyes. She'd expected devastation. She'd expected drama. She'd expected me to hand her the spotlight while I crumbled. Instead, I was offering her exactly what she wanted: public acknowledgement, family solidarity, a place at the center of attention, and she didn't know what to do with it. She looked around at the staring guests, at our mother who was gripping the edge of her seat. Yes, of course, I'm sorry, I had to tell you." "I understand," I said, and meant it. I understood perfectly. I understood that she was a viper who'd been feeding on my happiness since we were children. I understood that this pregnancy announcement was supposed to be the knife that killed my marriage before it began. I understood that in my first life, this exact moment had been the beginning of my end. I also understood that this time I held all the cards. "Shall we continue?" I asked the officiant, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He nodded weakly and found his place in the ceremony book. Adrian leaned close as the officiant resumed speaking. "What the hell is she talking about?" he whispered, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We'll handle it at the reception," I murmured back, meeting his ice-blue eyes with perfect calm. "Trust me." He didn't, of course. Adrian Blackwood didn't trust anyone. The ruthless CEO of Blackwood Industries, the man who'd built an empire on calculated risks and cold logic, didn't understand why I wasn't falling apart. In our first life, he'd never loved me. Our marriage had been a business arrangement between families, though I'd been naive enough to hope for something more. When Miranda had revealed her pregnancy at our wedding, he'd believed every word of her tearful confession that they'd had a brief affair before our engagement. He'd divorced me within 6 months, married her within a year, and never looked back. But I'd learned something valuable in my first life during those final years of pain and poverty. Adrian Blackwood's greatest weakness was his absolute certainty that he was the smartest person in any room. He'd believed Miranda's lies because they'd fit his worldview, that he was irresistible, that women would do anything for him, that emotional attachments were transactional. This time, I was using that arrogance against him. We finished the vows. I said I do with a clear voice and a steady hand. Adrian kissed me with the mechanical precision of a man fulfilling a contract. The guests applauded with uncertain enthusiasm, still buzzing about Miranda's announcement. As we walked back down the aisle, I caught sight of the other key players in this drama. Adrian's father, Charles Blackwood, sat in the second row with his pinched, disapproving face. His mother, Patricia, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the part of the gracious matriarch even as her gaze flickered with calculation. Adrian's younger brother, Justin, lounged in his seat with a smirk that I remembered all too well from my first life. The expression of a man who thought he'd gotten away with something, because he had. In my first life, Justin had been Miranda's actual lover, the real father of her child. But Miranda had been smart enough to aim higher, to pin the pregnancy on Adrian instead. Justin had helped her, feeding her information about Adrian's schedule, creating opportunities for her to be seen with his brother, all while continuing their affair in secret. It had been a perfect con, almost. The reception was held in the Blackwood family's estate ballroom, a cavernous space of crystal chandeliers and old money. As Adrian and I made our entrance to polite applause, I scanned the crowd and found Miranda holding court near the champagne fountain. One hand still pressed protectively against her stomach. She'd changed into a soft pink dress that screamed innocent victim. Our mother hovered beside her, whispering urgently. A cluster of guests surrounded them, offering congratulations and concerned glances in my direction. Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, my voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. The ballroom fell silent. Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us today. Before we begin the reception, there's something important I'd like to address. Adrian tensed beside me. Vivian. My sister Miranda made an announcement during our ceremony, I continued, walking toward her with unhurried steps. My heels clicked against the marble floor. She's pregnant. This is wonderful news, and as her sister, I'm absolutely thrilled for her. Miranda's eyes narrowed slightly. She couldn't figure out my angle. However, I said, stopping a few feet away from her, there seems to be some confusion about the circumstances. Miranda, you mentioned that you couldn't keep this secret anymore. I want to make sure I understand correctly. Are you saying that Adrian is the father? The gasps this time were sharper, more horrified. I'd said out loud what everyone had been thinking, but was too polite to voice. Miranda's face flushed. Vivian, I didn't want to say it like that. I never meant to hurt you. It was before you were engaged. Just a few times we were both... Before we were engaged, I repeated thoughtfully. So, about 4 months ago? Yes, Miranda said quickly, relief flooding her features. She thought I was giving her an out, a way to minimize the betrayal. It was brief and meaningless, and we both regretted it immediately. I only told you now because I'm 3 months along and I couldn't hide it anymore. I'm so sorry. 3 months. In my first life, I'd been too distraught to do the math, to question the timeline. But I'd had 3 years to think about it. 3 years to piece together the truth. 3 months, I said. That's interesting. I turned to Adrian, who looked like he was carved from ice. Adrian, do you remember where you were 4 months ago? Late July, specifically? His jaw worked. I was in Singapore. The merger with Chen Technologies. I was there for 6 weeks. That's right, I said pleasantly. I remember because I visited you for a weekend. We had dinner at that restaurant on Marina Bay, the one with the view of the light show. I could see his mind working, calculating dates, reconstructing his schedule with the precision of a man who lived in his calendar. I left for Singapore on July 12th, he said slowly. I didn't return until August 24th. I turned back to Miranda, whose face had gone pale. So you're saying that you and Adrian had an affair before our engagement, which would have been in late July, but Adrian was in Singapore for that entire period. That's quite a trick. Miranda looked around frantically, her eyes landing on Justin. I must have been confused about the dates. Maybe it was before he left, or maybe you're lying, I said softly. The ballroom erupted in whispers. My mother grabbed Miranda's arm, her face white. Charles Blackwood stood up from his table, his expression thunderous. This is a serious accusation, Patricia Blackwood said, her voice cutting through the noise. Young lady, my son would never... Mrs. Blackwood, I'm not accusing your son of anything, I said calmly. In fact, I'm quite certain he's innocent. But since this situation has been made public at my wedding, I think we deserve some clarity. Don't you agree? I pulled a manila envelope from where I'd hidden it beneath the gift table. In my first life, I'd learned too late about the power of evidence, of documentation, of having proof instead of just pain. I took the liberty of arranging something, I said, opening the envelope. Miranda has been living in my apartment for the past 4 months. I sublet it to her when I moved in with Adrian's family before the wedding. During that time, she left several items behind, including a toothbrush. Miranda's eyes went wide with horror. I had a DNA test performed, I continued, pulling out the papers. Prenatal testing has come a long way. You can determine paternity as early as 7 weeks using a simple blood sample from the mother and a DNA sample from the potential father. I arranged for Miranda to have blood work done 2 weeks ago. She thought it was a routine screening I was paying for as a sisterly gift, and I had that toothbrush tested against the sample. You can't do that, Miranda gasped. That's illegal. That's invasion of privacy. Actually, it's not, Adrian said, his voice like a blade. He'd recovered from his shock and was now fully engaged, his analytical mind seizing on the facts. The toothbrush was abandoned property in an apartment you own, Vivian. And if Miranda consented to the blood draw, even under false pretenses, the test is admissible. Unethical, perhaps, but not illegal. He held out his hand. Let me see those results. I handed him the papers. The ballroom was dead silent now, 300 people holding their collective breath. Adrian read for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at Miranda with eyes like chips of ice. According to this, he said quietly, I am not the father of your child. The ballroom exploded. Guests surged forward, craning their necks to see. My mother made a strangled sound. Charles Blackwood's face turned purple. But I wasn't done. The test identified a familial match, I continued, pulling out a second set of papers. The father shares significant genetic markers with Adrian, which means the father is a male relative, brother, father, uncle, or cousin. I let that sink in for a moment, watching the color drain from several faces in the crowd. Now I could speculate about which male relative we're discussing, I said. But I'd rather let the evidence speak for itself. I pulled out a third envelope, this one containing a USB drive. I also took the liberty of installing security cameras in my apartment. For safety, you understand. Miranda was living there alone after all. I wanted to make sure she was protected. Miranda's knees buckled. Justin had gone gray. Those cameras captured some very interesting footage over the past 4 months, I said. Would anyone like to see? That won't be necessary, Charles Blackwood said sharply, standing. His eyes were fixed on Justin, who looked like he might vomit. Justin, my office. Now. Dad, I can explain, Justin started. Now. The pieces were falling into place for everyone in the room. The whispers turned to gasps, gasps to exclamations. I could see the society matrons calculating the scandal, the business associates reassessing the Blackwood family's stability, the younger guests pulling out their phones to live tweet the drama. This was what I'd learned in my first life. In the world of the wealthy and powerful, reputation was currency. Miranda and Justin had thought they could manipulate that currency by destroying mine. Instead, I'd turned their weapon back on them, but I still had one more card to play. There's something else you should all know, I said, my voice rising above the chaos. Miranda came to me 3 weeks ago with a proposal. She said that if I gave her $5 million, she would disappear and never reveal the identity of her baby's father. She said it would save everyone embarrassment. I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording. Miranda's voice filled the ballroom, tinny but clear. Come on, Viv. $5 million is nothing to the Blackwoods. Think of it as a wedding present. I'll take the money, move to Europe, and no one will ever know about me and Adrian. You get your perfect marriage, I get to start over. Everyone wins. I refused, I said, stopping the recording. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I was tired of paying for other people's betrayals. In my life, I've given and given and given, and people like Miranda have taken and taken and taken. Not anymore. I looked directly at my sister, who had collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. You wanted to announce your pregnancy at my wedding, I said. You wanted the drama, the attention, the chaos? So I let you have it. Every bit of it. How does it feel? Miranda couldn't answer. She was sobbing too hard, our mother trying desperately to comfort her while backing away from the social contamination. As for the identity of the father, I said, turning to where Justin was being physically dragged toward the exit by his father, I'll let the Blackwood family handle that privately. But I want to make one thing clear to everyone here. Adrian is innocent. He had nothing to do with this situation. In fact, he's as much a victim as I am. I took Adrian's hand. He was staring at me like he'd never seen me before, a mix of shock and something that might have been respect in his eyes. This marriage begins with honesty, I said to the room. Whatever problems Adrian and I have in the future, they'll be our own, not manufactured by people who wanted to use us for their own gain. Patricia Blackwood stood, her composure cracking just enough to show the steel beneath. This reception is over. Everyone out, now! The guests began to file out, already pulling out phones to spread the gossip. I could imagine the headlines tomorrow. Blackwood wedding scandal, sister's betrayal exposed, DNA bombshell at society wedding. In my first life, those headlines had been about my humiliation. This time, they'd be about my victory. As the ballroom emptied, Adrian pulled me aside into a small alcove. We were finally alone, surrounded by the echoes of what had just happened. How long have you known? He asked quietly. About Miranda and Justin? Long enough to prepare. The cameras, the DNA test, the recording. You planned all of this. Yes. He studied my face, his expression unreadable. Why didn't you just call off the wedding? Expose them before the ceremony? Why go through with marrying me? This was the question I'd known was coming, the one I'd spent 3 years deciding how to answer. Because in my first life, I stopped, correcting myself. Because I've learned that the best revenge isn't cancellation. It's letting people destroy themselves with their own choices. Your first life, Adrian repeated. You said that before. What does that mean? I met his eyes. I'd never told anyone about the rebirth, about opening my eyes 3 years in the past with all my memories intact. It sounded insane. But Adrian Blackwood was many things. Cold, calculating, ruthless. But he wasn't stupid. It means I've lived this day before, I said simply. And it went very differently. I expected him to scoff, to dismiss me as hysterical or delusional. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, considering. That would explain a lot, he said. Your composure, your preparation, the way you've been 3 steps ahead of everyone for months. You believe me? I believe in evidence, he said. And the evidence suggests that you've had access to information you shouldn't have had. Either you're psychic, extremely lucky, or you're telling the truth about having lived this before. Given that I don't believe in luck or psychic powers, that leaves your explanation. It was the most Adrian Blackwood response possible. I felt something crack in my chest, not quite forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of understanding. In my first life, I said slowly. Miranda announced her pregnancy at our wedding. I fell apart. You believed her story about the affair, divorced me, and married her within a year. Justin helped her maintain the lie. I spent 3 years trying to prove the truth, but no one believed me. I died alone and broke, while Miranda lived in your house and spent your money. Adrian's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. How did you die? Cancer, I said. Stress-induced, the doctor said. My immune system just gave up. He was quiet for a long moment. And you came back to this moment, to our wedding. I came back to my 25th birthday. 3 years ago. I've been preparing ever since. For revenge. For justice, I corrected. There's a difference. Is there? He asked. You just destroyed your sister's reputation, exposed my brother as an adulterer, and created the biggest scandal this city has seen in decades. All at your own wedding. Our wedding, I said. And yes, I did. Because in my first life, they destroyed me and no one cared. At least this way, the truth is out. Adrian moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. You could have just told me. Warned me about Miranda and Justin. We could have handled this privately. Would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd come to you 3 years ago and said your brother was sleeping with my sister with no proof, would you have taken my word for it? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I needed evidence, I said. I needed them to expose themselves. And I needed everyone to see it happen because in my first life, Miranda convinced everyone that I was the crazy one, the vindictive ex-wife making up stories. This time, there's no ambiguity. No, he said, she said. Just facts. And us? Adrian asked. This marriage. Was that part of your revenge too? It was a fair question. In my first life, I'd married Adrian because I'd been stupidly, naively in love with the idea of him. I'd thought I could make him love me back, that I could be the wife he needed. I'd been wrong. This time, I'd married him because I needed the Blackwood name and resources to execute my plan. I needed the cameras, the DNA testing, the legal protection. I needed to be inside the family to destroy it from within. But I'd also married him because, despite everything, despite knowing he was cold and calculating and incapable of love, I still wanted to see if there was something more beneath that ice. Some part of me that had died in my first life still hoped that this time could be different. I don't know, I admitted. Ask me again in a year. Adrian's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Fair enough. He took my hand, examining the wedding ring on my finger. You're not what I expected, Vivian Chen. Neither are you, I said. In my first life, you were exactly what I expected, cold, distant, quick to judge. But today, you listened. You looked at the evidence. You didn't just assume I was being hysterical. I'm a businessman, he said. I deal in facts. You gave me facts. And what do the facts tell you now? He considered this, his thumb absently rubbing the ring on my finger. That I married a woman who is significantly more dangerous than I realized, that my family is even more dysfunctional than I thought, and that my brother is about to be disinherited. Your father won't disinherit Justin, I said. Bad for business, but Justin will be sent somewhere far away. London, maybe, or Singapore. Somewhere he can't cause more scandal. You sound very certain of that. Because it's what happened in my first life, I said. When the truth eventually came out, about 3 years from now, when Miranda's son started looking more and more like Justin and DNA testing had become standard, your father handled it quietly. Sent Justin abroad, paid Miranda to keep quiet, buried the scandal. The only difference this time is the timeline. Adrian's expression hardened. Not the only difference. This time, Miranda won't be getting any payoff, and Justin won't be coming back. You sound angry. I am angry, he said. My brother betrayed me. Your sister betrayed you. They tried to use both of us as pawns in their little game. I don't tolerate betrayal. Neither do I said quietly. Not anymore. We stood there in the alcove, two people who had just gotten married for the wrong reasons, surrounded by the wreckage of a family scandal. It should have felt terrible. It should have felt like a disaster. Instead, it felt like the first honest moment of my entire life. We should go, Adrian said finally. The hotel suite is reserved. We have a flight to the Maldives tomorrow for the honeymoon. Right, the honeymoon. I'd forgotten about that in all the planning. In my first life, the honeymoon had been canceled due to the scandal. We'd never gone, and Adrian had held it against me, another mark in the column of reasons our marriage failed. Do you still want to go? I asked, after all this. Why wouldn't I? He said. We're married. We might as well start this partnership properly. Besides, I'm curious. About what? About you, he said simply. About who you really are, Vivian Blackwood. Because the woman I thought I married doesn't exist. You're something else entirely. Vivian Blackwood, not Chen. The name change felt different this time, weighted with possibility instead of loss. I'm the same person I always was, I said. I just stopped letting people walk all over me. No, Adrian said, leading me toward the exit. You're someone who died and came back. That changes things. We walked through the empty ballroom, our footsteps echoing on marble. The staff was already cleaning up, removing the evidence of what should have been a celebration. I caught glimpses of my face in the ornate mirrors lining the walls. I looked the same as I had that morning, perfectly made up, hair in place, the picture of bridal elegance. But I felt different, lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight for 3 years and had finally set it down. Outside, the limousine was waiting. Adrian's assistant had already loaded our luggage for the honeymoon. As we drove away from the Blackwood estate, I looked back at the mansion where I'd spent so many miserable months in my first life. I wouldn't miss it. My phone buzzed. Text messages were pouring in from friends, from acquaintances, from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know what had happened, wanted the details, wanted to take sides in the scandal. I turned my phone off. Smart, Adrian said from beside me. He'd also turned his phone off. The circus can wait until tomorrow. Will it be bad? I asked. The fallout? Probably, psa, he said. My father will be furious. My mother will go into crisis management mode. The board will have questions about family stability. Blackwood Industries' stock might take a hit. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I didn't want to damage your company. Don't apologize, Adrian said. This isn't your fault. It's Justin's and Miranda's. And frankly, if our stock takes a hit because of a family scandal, that says more about investor confidence than anything else. We'll recover. He looked at me with those ice blue eyes. Besides, I'm starting to think that having you on my side might be the best business decision I've ever made. I'm not a business decision, I said. No, he agreed. You're much more interesting than that. The hotel suite was the same one we'd never reached in my first life. Presidential level, panoramic views of the city, champagne on ice. The staff had decorated with rose petals and candles, the full romantic treatment. It felt absurd after everything that had happened. I'll take the couch, Adrian said, loosening his tie. Unless you'd prefer I get a separate room. In my first life, we'd consummated our marriage dutifully, mechanically, with all the passion of a business transaction. It had been exactly as disappointing as I'd feared. But this wasn't my first life. We're married, I said, echoing his earlier words. We might as well start this partnership properly. His eyebrow rose. Are you sure? After the day you've had? After the day I've had, I said, I want to make a choice. A real choice. Not because I'm supposed to or because it's expected, but because I want to. I crossed the suite and stood in front of him, close enough to see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. In my first life, I said softly, you were a stranger I married out of obligation. This time I chose you, chose this marriage, chose to stand next to you, even when I could have burned it all down. I want to see what that choice leads to. Adrian's hand came up to cup my face, his touch surprisingly gentle. You're extraordinary, Vivian Blackwood. I'm a woman who refuses to be a victim, I corrected. Like I said, he murmured against my lips. Extraordinary. This kiss was nothing like the perfunctory ceremony kiss. This was heat and challenge and two people who had decided to try something impossible. It wasn't love. I wasn't naive enough to call it that. But it was honest. And right now, honesty was more valuable than love had ever been. We fell into bed together, and for the first time in 2 lives, I felt like I was living instead of just surviving. The Maldives were different this time. In my first life, this honeymoon had never happened. This time, I spent 5 days learning who Adrian Blackwood really was beneath the ice-cold CEO facade. He was methodical about everything, from how he organized his schedule to how he touched me. He was unexpectedly funny in a dry, cutting way. He read financial reports at breakfast and science fiction novels before bed. He hated seafood but pretended to like it when the resort staff served it. He had a scar on his ribs from a childhood surfing accident he'd never told anyone about. And he listened, really listened, in a way I'd never experienced before. On the third night, as we sat on our private deck watching the sunset, I told him everything. The whole story of my first life, every painful detail, every betrayal, every moment of humiliation. I told him about dying alone, about waking up 3 years in the past, about the meticulous planning that had led to this moment. He didn't interrupt, didn't question, just listened and processed the way he processed everything. "You're telling me," he said when I finished, "that I was an absolute bastard in your first timeline." "You were," I confirmed. "Cold, dismissive. You divorced me as soon as it was convenient and never looked back. And yet you married me again. I told you I needed the resources, the name, access to your family." "That's not the whole truth," Adrian said, setting down his drink. "You could have found other ways to expose Miranda and Justin, other paths to revenge. But you chose to marry me specifically. Why?" I'd been asking myself the same question for 3 years. The answer was complicated and probably stupid. Because some part of me wanted to see if it could be different, I admitted. If I could be different. If we could be different together. And can we? "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "Ask me again in a year." He smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his face. "You keep saying that. It's starting to sound like a challenge." "Maybe it is." Adrian leaned closer, his hand finding mine in the tropical darkness. "I'll take that challenge, but I'm warning you, I don't lose." "Neither do I said. "Not anymore." We flew back to reality on day 6. The circus was waiting, exactly as Adrian had predicted. The scandal had exploded across every media outlet. Blackwood wedding exposed, sister's betrayal revealed, DNA test shocks society wedding. My phone had 300 missed calls. Adrian's assistant had sent 17 increasingly frantic emails. But the Blackwood family machine had already gone into motion. Charles had held a press conference announcing that Justin was taking a position with the company's London office and would not be available for comment. Miranda had been quietly paid off after all, not by the Blackwoods, but by my mother, who had liquidated her savings to make her younger daughter disappear to Europe before the media could destroy her completely. My mother had left me a voicemail. "I hope you're happy, Vivian. You've destroyed this family." I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. Some people would never understand that I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply stopped letting the rot stay hidden. Returning to the Blackwood mansion was different this time. In my first life, I'd moved into Adrian's wing of the estate as a nervous bride, trying to fit into a family that had never wanted me. I'd tiptoed around Patricia's disapproval and Charles's indifference, trying desperately to be good enough. This time, I walked in as the woman who had exposed their family's dirty secrets and survived. Patricia greeted me with icy courtesy. Charles barely acknowledged my existence. The staff whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. I didn't care. "They'll come around," Adrian said as we unpacked in our suite. "Or they won't. Either way, you're my wife. That means something in this family." "Does it?" I asked. "In my first life, being your wife meant nothing." "In your first life, I was an idiot who believed lies over evidence," Adrian said bluntly. I'm trying to be better this time. Give me credit for that at least." Fair enough. Life settled into a strange new rhythm. Adrian went to work, making decisions that affected thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. I started taking online courses in business management and investment strategy. In my first life, I'd been financially dependent, and it had destroyed me. This time, I was building my own foundation. I also started documenting everything. Every conversation with Patricia, every interaction with Charles, every passive-aggressive comment from the staff. I'd learned in my first life that evidence was everything, and I wasn't going to be caught unprepared again. 3 months after the wedding, Patricia made her move. "We need to talk," she said, cornering me in the family dining room, "about your behavior." "My behavior," I repeated calmly, setting down my coffee. "Please elaborate." "You've embarrassed this family," Patricia said, her voice dripping with controlled fury. "The scandal at your wedding, the media attention, the damage to our reputation, it's unacceptable." "I exposed the truth," I said. "If you find the truth embarrassing, perhaps you should examine why that is." "Don't you dare speak to me that way," Patricia hissed. "I've tolerated you because Adrian seems to have developed some inexplicable attachment. But don't think for a moment that you belong here. You're a fortune hunter who got lucky, nothing more." In my first life, this moment had come 2 weeks after the wedding, and I'd crumbled. I'd cried in my room for hours, believing every word, feeling like an imposter in designer clothes. This time, I smiled. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said, pleasantly, "I have recorded this conversation. I've also documented every instance of hostility you've directed at me since the wedding. If you'd like to continue questioning my place in this family, I'd be happy to share those recordings with Adrian and let him decide whether your behavior is acceptable." Patricia's face went white. "You wouldn't dare." "I've exposed my own sister's lies in front of 300 people," I said. "What makes you think I'd hesitate to defend myself against you?" I stood, smoothing my dress. "I don't want to fight with you, Patricia. I'm not your enemy, but I'm not going to be bullied either. I've been bullied before, and I've learned that the only way to stop it is to stand up. So either treat me with respect, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how you treat your daughter-in-law. Your choice." I walked out, leaving her speechless. That night, Adrian found me in the library. "My mother says you threatened her." "I told her I wouldn't tolerate being bullied," I corrected. "There's a difference. She's not used to being challenged." "She'll adjust," I said. "Or she won't. Either way, I'm not apologizing for defending myself." Adrian sat beside me, his expression thoughtful. "You've changed since the wedding." "Have I?" "You're more assertive, confident, like you're not afraid anymore." "I'm not afraid," I said. "I've already lived through the worst version of this life. Everything now is an improvement." He took my hand, threading our fingers together. "Tell me something. In your first life, did we ever have a real conversation? One that wasn't about schedules or obligations?" I thought back to those miserable months. "No, we barely spoke." "That was my fault," Adrian said quietly. "I treated our marriage like a contract to be managed, not a partnership to be built. I'm trying to do better this time." "I know," I said. I see it." "Do you?" He turned to face me fully. "Because I can't read you, Vivian. I don't know if you're just going through the motions, executing some elaborate plan, or if there's something real here." It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen him, this man who controlled boardrooms and made grown men nervous with a glance. "I don't know either," I admitted. "In my first life, I loved you desperately, and it destroyed me. This time, I'm trying not to make the same mistake. But I also can't help feeling something, some version of what could be." "That's enough," Adrian said. "Something is more than nothing. We can work with something." 6 months after the wedding, Miranda resurfaced. She'd been living in Paris, courtesy of our mother's money. But apparently Europe wasn't exciting enough, or the money had run out, or she'd simply gotten bored with exile. She showed up at the Blackwood estate on a Tuesday afternoon, baby on her hip, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Vivian," she begged at the door. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I was stupid and selfish, and I ruined everything. But I'm your sister. I'm family. You can't just abandon me." In my first life, I'd never had this moment. Miranda had won, taken everything, and never needed to apologize. Seeing her like this, broken, desperate, holding Justin's child, should have felt satisfying. Instead, it just felt sad. "You're not sorry," I said quietly. "You're out of money and out of options. There's a difference." "I am sorry," Miranda insisted. "I've had months to think about what I did, about how I hurt you. I was jealous, Vivian. You always had everything. The looks, the intelligence, the opportunities. I wanted to take something from you for once. So you tried to destroy my marriage? Yes, she whispered. And I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, I just need help getting back on my feet. I'll stay out of your life, I promise. Just help me this once. I looked at her, really looked at her. The sister I'd shared a bedroom with as kids, who had borrowed my clothes and copied my homework and slowly, methodically poisoned our relationship with jealousy and resentment. In my first life, she'd won. She'd taken my husband, my dignity, my life. And she'd never paid for it because I'd died before justice could come. This time, I had a choice. No, I said simply. Miranda's face crumpled. Please, Vivian, I have a baby. Your nephew. You can't just... That baby has a father, I said. Justin makes a very comfortable salary at the London office. If you need support, contact him. Or contact our mother, who gave you her life savings, but don't come to me looking for redemption or forgiveness or money. You made your choices. Live with them. You're heartless, Miranda spat, the tears drying instantly. You always were. This is why Adrian didn't love you, why no one loves you. You're cold and calculating and alive, I interrupted, which is more than I was in my first life. Close the door on your way out. I shut the door in her face. Through the wood, I could hear her cursing, then crying, then finally leaving. Adrian appeared from the hallway. He'd been listening the whole time. That was harsh, he said. It was necessary, I corrected. In my first life, I was kind. I was forgiving. I was understanding, and it killed me, literally. This time, I'm choosing myself. She's your sister. She's the person who destroyed my life for petty jealousy, I said. Being related doesn't obligate me to set myself on fire to keep her warm. Adrian nodded slowly. Fair enough, though for what it's worth, you're wrong about one thing. What's that? The part where no one loves you, he said quietly. That's not true. Not anymore. My heart stuttered. Adrian? I know we said we'd wait a year, he interrupted, that you wanted to see if things could be different. But I'm not good at waiting, and I'm not good at uncertainty. So I'm telling you now, this is real for me. You're real for me. Whatever this is, whatever we're building, I'm all in. I'd spent 3 years preparing for every possible scenario. I'd planned for betrayal, for scandal, for revenge. I'd prepared for Patricia's hostility and Miranda's return and every obstacle I could imagine. I hadn't prepared for this, for Adrian Blackwood, the coldest man I'd ever known, standing in the hallway of his family's mansion and offering me his heart. You said you wanted to see if we could be different this time, Adrian continued. We are different. I'm different because of you. You showed me that I was capable of being an idiot, of missing what was right in front of me, of choosing convenience over truth. You made me want to be better. I'm not easy to love, I warned. I'm calculating and vengeful, and I hold grudges. Good, Adrian said. I'm cold and ruthless, and I don't trust anyone. We're perfect for each other. He closed the distance between us, his hands framing my face. I'm not asking you to love me back, not yet. I know you're still figuring out what you want, but I wanted you to know where I stand. So when you're ready to answer, you know the question has already been asked. I died because I loved you, I whispered. In my first life. The stress of losing you, of being cast aside, of fighting to prove the truth while you looked through me like I was nothing, it killed me. So, forgive me if I'm scared to go down that path again. I'm not that man anymore, Adrian said fiercely. That man was a fool who didn't recognize a gift when it was standing right in front of him. This time, I see you. I see how brilliant you are, how strong, how absolutely ruthless when you need to be. And I'm choosing you right back. It would be so easy to fall into this, to let myself believe that this time would be different, that love could work when we were both different people. But I'd learned in my first life that easy was often fatal. Ask me again in 6 months, I said. Adrian laughed, the sound startled out of him. You're really committed to this timeline thing. I'm committed to not making the same mistakes, I said. In my first life, I rushed into love and it destroyed me. This time, I'm building a foundation first, brick by brick. 6 months, Adrian said. I can wait 6 months. And if my answer is no, then we'll still be partners, he said. Still married, still building something. But I'll know where we stand. It was the most reasonable, logical approach to love I'd ever encountered, which I realized was very Adrian. Okay, I said. 6 months. Time passed. The scandal faded into old news, replaced by fresh gossip. Justin stayed in London, sending occasional reports that were professionally cordial and personally cold. Miranda disappeared again, presumably back to Europe. My mother stopped calling, which was its own kind of relief. I threw myself into education and self-improvement. I took courses in financial management, contract law and business, strategy. I started meeting with Adrian's associates, learning the landscape of his world. I built relationships with the society wives Patricia thought she could use against me, offering them investment advice and networking opportunities. I also started a foundation for women leaving abusive relationships, for people fighting financial fraud, for anyone who needed support while standing up to power. I funded it with my own money. Adrian had settled a generous amount on me after the wedding, and I was using it to build exactly the kind of support system I'd needed in my first life. You're building an empire, Adrian observed one night, watching me work through charity applications on my laptop. I'm building a safety net, I corrected, for people who need someone in their corner. Like you needed. Like I needed, I agreed. Like I had in my second chance, but most people don't get second chances. So I'm trying to be that for them. Adrian pulled me away from the laptop into his arms. You're remarkable. I'm practical. You're both. 9 months after the wedding, Patricia finally softened. It happened at a family dinner of all places. Charles was droning on about quarterly projections. Patricia was making passive-aggressive comments about the soup, and I was counting down the minutes until I could escape. Then Patricia said, Vivian, I saw the article about your foundation, the one in the Times. I looked up warily. Yes? It was well done, she said stiffly. The work you're doing, it's admirable. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't warmth, but it was acknowledgement from a woman who didn't give acknowledgement easily. Thank you, I said carefully. Perhaps you could speak at the next auxiliary luncheon, Patricia continued, about financial literacy for women. I think the ladies would find it educational. It was an olive branch, a small one but real. I'd be happy to, I said. Charles looked up from his tablet, seeming to notice me for the first time in months. Your foundation is doing good work, Vivian. I looked into the numbers, impressive growth, solid management. High praise from a man who measured everything in profit margins and efficiency metrics. I had a good teacher, I said, glancing at Adrian. Your son taught me that sentiment without strategy is just waste. Charles almost smiled. Almost. That night, in our bedroom, Adrian pulled me onto his lap. They're coming around. It only took 9 months and a nationally published article, I said wryly. My family doesn't do anything quickly, Adrian said, but they're practical. They can see that you're an asset, not a liability, and they respect strength. I don't need their respect, I said. I just need them to leave me alone. You have both now, Adrian pointed out. So what's next in your master plan? I leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I don't know, in my first life, I was so focused on survival that I never thought about what came after. Now I'm building something new, and I'm not sure what the end point is. Maybe there isn't an end point, Adrian said. Maybe it's just ongoing, building and growing and becoming. That sounds uncertain. It is uncertain, he agreed. But isn't that better than the certainty of misery? I turned to look at him. When did you become a philosopher? When I married a woman who came back from death with a checklist and a vengeful heart, Adrian said. You make me think differently. Is that good or bad? It's terrifying, he said honestly, and exhilarating. And I wouldn't change it. 1 year after the wedding, on our anniversary, Adrian took me back to the same ballroom where we'd gotten married. It had been transformed. No guests, no ceremony, just the two of us and a room full of candles and flowers. What is this? I asked. A do-over, Adrian said. Our wedding was chaos. Our first dance was interrupted by a scandal. I never got to do this properly. He pulled me onto the empty dance floor as music swelled from hidden speakers. Something classical and romantic, completely unlike the first time. We danced alone in the ballroom, and it felt like a different life. A better one. It's been a year, Adrian said softly. I asked you to give me a year to prove that this time could be different. That we could be different. So I'm asking now, did I succeed? I looked up at him, this man who had been a stranger, then a burden, then a partner, then something more. In my first life, I said slowly, I loved you desperately and hopelessly. I loved the idea of you, the potential of us, all while you barely knew I existed. It was the kind of love that hollows you out, that takes and takes until there's nothing left. Adrian's arms tightened around me, but he didn't interrupt. This time, I continued, I didn't let myself love you. I held back, protected myself, kept score. I told myself it was about survival, about not making the same mistakes. But really, I was just scared. And now? He asked quietly. Now I think I've been falling in love with you for months, I admitted. Not the desperate, grasping love from before, something steadier, something that grows instead of consumes. And it terrifies me because I know what happens when I love you and you don't love me back. Vivian, Adrian said, stopping our dance. Look at me. I met his eyes, those ice blue eyes that had once looked through me like I was nothing. I love you, he said clearly. Not because you exposed my family's secrets. Not because you're brilliant or strategic or terrifying. I love you because you showed me who I could be. You held up a mirror to the worst version of myself and demanded better. You chose me when you had every reason not to. You built something real out of a contract marriage and sheer force of will. He cupped my face in his hands. You asked me to wait a year to prove things could be different. They are different. I am different. Because of you, and I will spend every day for the rest of our lives proving that this love is real, that I see you, that you are the best decision I have ever made. I'd been preparing for this moment for a year, planning what I'd say, how I'd feel, what choice I'd make. All those plans evaporated. I love you too, I whispered. God help me, I love you too. Adrian kissed me there in the empty ballroom, and it felt like coming home. Not to a place, but to a version of myself I'd lost in my first life and slowly built back in my second. So what now? Adrian asked against my lips. You've had your revenge, built your foundation, saved yourself? What does Vivian Blackwood do for an encore? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in 2 lifetimes. Live, just live, really, truly live. I can work with that, Adrian said. We danced until the candles burned low, 2 people who had been strangers finding their way to something real. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd wanted in my first life. It was better, messy and complicated and built on truth instead of illusion. Later, much later, as we lay in bed, Adrian asked, Do you ever regret it? Coming back, knowing what you know? Wouldn't it have been easier to just rest? I thought about it seriously. About the pain of living through everything again, of watching Miranda's betrayal unfold, of rebuilding myself from nothing. No, I said finally, because this time, I'm alive. Really alive. Not just surviving, not just going through the motions. I'm building something that matters. I have a partnership that's real. I have a future that's mine. And the people who hurt you? Do you think they learned anything? I thought about Miranda, probably struggling in some European city with a toddler and no prospects. About Justin, exiled to London and stripped of his inheritance prospects. About the whispered scandal that would follow them forever. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe, maybe not. But that's not my responsibility anymore. I did what I needed to do for myself. The rest is up to them. Very philosophical, Adrian observed. I've had a lot of time to think, I said dryly. 3 extra years, actually. He laughed, pulling me closer. Do you think you'll ever tell anyone else? About the rebirth? Would you believe me if I told you I was from the future? I believe you, he said. But I'm biased. Then no, I said. Some truths are too strange to share. This one is just for us. For us, Adrian repeated like he was testing the words. I like that. Us. 2 years after the wedding, the foundation had expanded to 3 cities. I'd written a book about financial independence for women that had become a bestseller. Adrian and I had bought our own house, separate from the Blackwood estate, where we hosted dinners and made plans and built a life that was entirely ours. Patricia still made passive-aggressive comments, but now she also asked for my advice on investments. Charles actually acknowledged my presence. The society wives who had once whispered about me now competed for invitations to my fundraisers. And Miranda, I heard through the grapevine that she'd married some minor European aristocrat, probably lying about her past, probably repeating the same patterns. I felt nothing about it. No anger, no satisfaction, nothing. She was a chapter I'd closed. Justin sent a letter once from London. A rambling apology that blamed everyone but himself, that asked for forgiveness without acknowledging the harm. I burned it without responding. Some people would never understand what they'd done. That was fine. I didn't need their understanding. I just needed my freedom. You're thinking too loud, Adrian said from where he was reading beside me on the couch. We were in our living room, the one we'd decorated together, in the house we'd chosen together. Just reflecting, I said. On? On how different everything is. 2 years ago, I was standing at an altar watching my sister announce her pregnancy. Now I'm here with you, and everything I feared would happen didn't happen. Because you didn't let it, Adrian said, setting aside his book. You rewrote the story. We rewrote it, I corrected. I couldn't have done this alone. Sure you could have, Adrian said. You're terrifying when you're focused, but I'm glad you didn't have to. He pulled me against him, and we sat there in comfortable silence. Through the window, I could see the city lights, all those lives being lived, all those stories unfolding. In my first life, I'd died looking at similar lights, feeling like I'd wasted everything. This time, I was living, building, loving, choosing. My phone buzzed. A text from one of the foundation's clients. Got the job. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. I smiled and showed Adrian. Another victory, he said. Another person who gets a second chance, I corrected, even if they don't know that's what it is. Like you, Adrian said. Like me, I agreed. That night, as we got ready for bed, Adrian said, I have something for you. He handed me a small box. Inside was a necklace, simple, elegant, with a small pendant shaped like a phoenix. Rising from the ashes, he said. Seemed appropriate. I put it on, feeling the weight of it against my chest. A reminder of what I'd survived, what I'd built, who I'd become. Thank you, I said. Thank you, Adrian countered, for giving me a chance to be better, for showing me what partnership really means, for choosing me even when you had every reason not to. Best decision I ever made, I said. Both times. We laughed at that, the absurdity and truth of it, and fell into bed together. 5 years after the wedding, I got a letter. It was from Miranda, postmarked from somewhere in southern France. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Dear Vivian, it read. I'm writing, this because my therapist says I need to make amends. I don't know if you'll read this or if you'll care, but I need to say it anyway. I was wrong about everything. I was jealous and cruel, and I tried to destroy you out of spite. I told myself you had everything and I had nothing, but the truth is I was just unwilling to work for what I wanted, so I tried to take yours instead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the wedding, for Justin, for 3 years of poison. I'm sorry for being the kind of sister who would rather tear you down than build herself up. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. And I'm trying to be better. Your sister, Miranda. I read it twice, then set it aside. Everything okay? Adrian asked from his desk, where he was working on something for the company. Miranda wrote, I said. He looked up sharply. And? And she apologized. Actually apologized without making excuses or asking for anything. How do you feel about that? I considered the question seriously. 5 years ago, this letter would have meant everything. 3 years ago, I would have burned it. Now? I feel nothing, really, I said. Good for her for finally growing up, I guess. But it doesn't change anything for me. Fair enough, Adrian said. Are you going to respond? I don't think so, I said. Some chapters are closed. This is one of them. I filed the letter away and went back to my own work. The foundation was launching a new program, and I had proposals to review. That evening, as we cooked dinner together in our kitchen, another thing we'd never done in my first life, Adrian said, "Do you ever wonder if it was real? The rebirth, I mean, or if maybe you just had some kind of prophetic dream?" I paused, considering. Does it matter? Either way, I had information that saved me. Either way, I changed the outcome. True, Adrian said, stealing a piece of the vegetables I was chopping. But doesn't it matter to you, knowing if you actually died and came back or if it was something else? It matters less than you'd think, I said. What matters is that I learned from my mistakes, whether they were mistakes I actually made or just dreams of mistakes I might have made. The result is the same. Very pragmatic, Adrian observed. You married a pragmatist, I pointed out. I married the love of my life, he corrected. The pragmatism is just a bonus. 7 years after the wedding, we had our first child, a daughter. We named her Sophie, after no one in particular, because she deserved to be her own person without the weight of family expectations. Holding her in the hospital, I thought about my first life, about how I died never knowing this joy, about how Miranda's pregnancy announcement had been the thing that destroyed me, and now I had my own daughter who was born into love and stability. What are you thinking? Adrian asked softly, sitting beside me on the hospital bed. That I'm grateful, I said. For all of it, even the pain, because it taught me what I needed to know to get here. No regrets? Some, I admitted. I regret that I had to die to learn how to live. I regret the time I wasted in my first life trying to please people who would never be satisfied. I regret that my relationship with my sister has gone beyond repair. I looked down at Sophie, her tiny face scrunched up as she slept. But I don't regret this. Any of this. You, our life, our daughter, this is worth every painful step it took to get here. Adrian kissed my temple. I'm going to tell her, when she's old enough, about how her mother saved herself, saved me, saved us. That's a lot of pressure to put on a baby, I said with a smile. Not pressure, just truth. She should know that her mother is the strongest person I've ever met. 10 years after the wedding, I stood in that same ballroom again. But this time, it wasn't for a ceremony or a scandal. It was for a celebration. The foundation had helped over 10,000 people. The book had been translated into 12 languages. I'd been invited to speak at universities, at conferences, at events around the world. And tonight, we were throwing a party to celebrate a decade of building something real. The ballroom was packed with people whose lives had been changed. Women who'd left abusive relationships, people who'd escaped financial fraud, individuals who'd found their footing after devastating losses. They mingled with society wives and business associates, creating a weird but wonderful mix of worlds. This is incredible, Patricia said, approaching me with something that might have been genuine warmth. You've built something remarkable, Vivian. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Our relationship would never be maternal, but we'd found a way to be civil, even respectful. I judged you, Patricia said quietly. 10 years ago, I thought you were a social climber who'd gotten lucky. I was wrong. You're a force of nature. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from her. I accepted it with grace. I'm just someone who got a second chance, I said, and decided not to waste it. Later, much later, after the guests had gone and the staff had cleaned up, Adrian and I stood alone in the ballroom. The same space where he'd proposed a do-over, where I'd admitted I loved him, where so many important moments had unfolded. Do you ever miss it? Adrian asked. Your first life, I mean. Even though it was terrible, it was still yours. No, said without hesitation. That life was a half-life, a shadow life. I was surviving, not thriving. I was so desperate to be loved that I forgot to love myself. This life, our life, is real. It's built on truth and choice and partnership. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Not even to avoid all the pain? The pain made me who I am, I said. It taught me to be strong, to be careful, to value myself. Without it, I'd just be another naive girl who thought love conquered all. Love does conquer all, Adrian said with a smile. Just not the kind of love you were imagining. What kind of love, then? The kind that demands you be your best self. The kind that challenges and supports in equal measure. The kind that's built on respect and partnership, not just emotion. He pulled me close and we danced again in the empty ballroom like we had 10 years before. Thank you, Adrian said softly, for giving me the chance to be worthy of you. Thank you for becoming that person, I replied. We danced until dawn, two people who had been strangers, then strangers who got married, then strangers who fell in love, then partners who built a life. And somewhere in the multiverse, in some parallel timeline, the first version of me was still dying alone in a hospital room, believing she was worthless and unloved. But not here, not now, not anymore. Here, I was alive, I was loved, I was free, and that was the greatest revenge of all.